"You'll regret this, I won't obey," the Apache healer said. But the desert kept its secrets. The sun rose over the endless stretches of the Sonoran Desert, casting long, sharp shadows on the sand dunes that seemed to roll forever. Heat shimmered above the golden sands, and the wind whispered across the desert like a quiet warning. This was a place where only the brave or the desperate dared to tread. And today, one man was about to enter a world he did not fully understand. Elias Harper had been walking for hours. His boots were worn, his clothes torn from brambles and rocks, and his water supply was dangerously low. He had come to the desert with dreams of finding fortune, gold, and a life that could lift him out of the poverty he had known for so long. But now, as he trudged along the ridge of a sand dune, Elias realized how unprepared he was for the harshness of the land. The desert demanded respect, patience, and knowledge he did not yet have. In the distance, a faint outline appeared, a cluster of adobe structures tucked near the edge of a rocky hill. Smoke rose from a small fire, curling lazily into the air. Elias quickened his pace, his heart beating faster, not only from the exertion, but from hope. The settlement was small, hidden, and clearly not a place for strangers. Still, he had no choice. His leg had been cut badly by a sharp stone, and he knew that if he did not find help soon, he might not survive the desert another day. As he approached, the villagers, mostly Apache families, watched him cautiously from a distance. They had seen outsiders before, some friendly, some dangerous. But this one looked weak, desperate, and very much in need of help. Still, no one moved to meet him. The settlement had rules, and strangers had to earn trust. Elias entered the settlement slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Please," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need help. My leg, it's badly hurt. Please, can anyone help me?" From behind a wall of woven reeds, a woman stepped forward. She was tall and calm, her eyes sharp and deep, carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being listened to. This was Nokomis, the healer of the Apache people. She wore simple clothing, and around her neck hung small charms made of bone and stone, each one representing lessons learned from the desert. Her presence was commanding yet serene, like the desert itself. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "I won't obey your demands." Elias blinked, confused. I don't understand," he said. "I'm not demanding anything. I just need help." Nokomis studied him carefully. There was something in his eyes. Fear, hunger, desperation, but also a stubborn pride. He was like many outsiders she had seen before, brave in appearance but careless in judgment. "The desert keeps its secrets," she said slowly. "Those who enter unprepared, those who ignore its rules, they will suffer. I cannot simply give what you seek. You must learn to respect the land before it teaches you harsh lessons." Elias swallowed, his pride stung by her words. "I don't have time to learn your rules," he said. "I have a wound. I need help now. If I don't get help, I may die." Nokomis shook her head. "I can help you survive, but I will not bend to desperation or arrogance. You must follow my guidance fully." "Do not think you can command the desert or those who understand it. To try is to invite danger." Elias hesitated. His mind raced. He had traveled far, faced countless hardships, and now it seemed that even help was conditional, tied to a set of rules he did not yet understand. He looked around the settlement, seeing children peeking from behind walls, elders watching silently, and a few hunters who stood at a distance, arms folded. Everyone seemed to recognize the seriousness of Nokomi's words. I promise I will follow your guidance," he said, more out of necessity than understanding. "Just, please, help me." Nokomis nodded, though her eyes did not soften. "Very well, but know this," she said, her voice low and steady. "The desert does not forgive mistakes. If you fail to obey, if you let pride lead you, you will face consequences you cannot imagine." With that, She turned and began walking toward a small structure made of adobe and clay, Elias limping to follow. Inside, the air was cooler, shaded from the relentless sun, and smelled of dried herbs and earth. Nokomis set to work examining his leg. Her hands were skilled and confident, moving with precision and care. She cleaned the wound, applied healing herbs, and wrapped it tightly with cloth strips. Elias winced at the pain, but he did not pull away. As she worked, she spoke quietly, more to herself than to him. "The desert has memory," she said. "It watches, it judges, it tests, and it hides its secrets well. Some come seeking gold, some come seeking power, and some come seeking life. But none leave unchanged." Elias listened, trying to make sense of her words. He had always believed the desert to be nothing more than a barren wasteland full of sand and sun waiting to be conquered. But now, faced with Nokomis's calm authority and the stories she whispered, he began to sense that the desert was more than just land. It was alive, in a way he could not yet comprehend. After treating the wound, Nokomis instructed him to rest. "You must regain strength," she said. "Tomorrow we will begin the journey. But you must listen carefully. Every step you take in this desert matters. One wrong step, one careless action, and you may not survive." Elias nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Could he really follow the guidance of someone he barely knew? Was the desert truly as dangerous as she claimed? He lay down on a simple mat in the corner of the hut, exhaustion overtaking him. The sun outside had climbed higher, casting its heat across the sand, but inside there was a strange quiet, almost as if the desert itself had paused to watch. As Elias drifted into a light sleep, he thought about the stories he had heard on his travels. Tales of explorers lost to the desert, of ancient ruins buried beneath the sand, of spirits said to guard the land. Until now, he had dismissed them as superstitions. But looking at Nokomis, at her steady hands, her calm eyes, and the quiet authority she carried, he began to wonder if there was truth in these tales. The night came, and with it a cool breeze that swept through the settlement. The stars above the desert were bright and countless, stretching endlessly across the sky. From the outside, the desert seemed peaceful, almost inviting. But Elias, lying on the mat, could feel an unspoken tension in the air, a sense that the land was waiting, watching, testing. Nokomis's warning echoed in his mind: the desert keeps its secrets. Those who enter unprepared, they will suffer. Somewhere in the darkness he heard the faint sound of movement, the whisper of wind over sand, the distant howl of an animal, and perhaps something more. His imagination ran wild with fear and wonder. Could the desert really be alive in the way Nokomis described? Could it truly judge and punish those who came seeking its treasures without respect? As the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, Elias knew that his journey was only beginning. The desert stretched endlessly before him, full of dangers, mysteries, and lessons he had yet to learn. Nokomis had saved him once, but she had made it clear that survival was not guaranteed. He would need to listen, to follow, and perhaps, most importantly, to respect the land he had once thought to conquer. The settlement slowly came to life around him, with smoke rising from cooking fires and the low murmur of voices greeting the morning. Nokomis prepared for the journey, gathering herbs, water, and supplies, while Elias watched, understanding at last that this was no ordinary trip. This was a test, one that would challenge his mind, his courage, and his very understanding of the world around him. And as the sun rose higher over the desert, Elias Harper, the man who had come seeking fortune, realized that he was now part of something far greater, something ancient, powerful, and secret. The desert held its mysteries close, and it was up to him to survive, to learn, and to respect what it had to teach. The next morning, the desert greeted them with a harsh clarity. The sun rose quickly, turning the sand from gold to a blinding white. Heat rippled in waves across the dunes, and the wind carried a sharp dryness that made every breath taste like dust. Elias Harper struggled to keep up with Nokomis, who moved with surprising ease over the shifting sands. Her steps were measured and deliberate, as if she were in constant conversation with the desert itself. Elias had spent his life believing that determination and willpower were enough to overcome obstacles. But today, every step reminded him that the desert did not care about ambition or pride. It demanded knowledge, patience, and respect. Nokomis seemed to glide over the terrain, reading signs in the sand, noticing small changes in the wind, the shape of the rocks, and even the behavior of distant animals. Elias could only guess at what she saw. "You must pay attention," Nokomis said, her voice calm but firm. "Every footprint, every shadow, every sound tells a story. The desert does not give second chances. Do you understand?" Elias nodded quickly, swallowing his pride. "Yes, I'll pay attention," he said, though he wasn't sure how to do that. He had never thought of the land as speaking to people. To him it had always been silent, waiting to be conquered. They traveled for hours in silence, broken only by the sound of the wind and the crunch of sand under their feet. Elias tried to observe as Nokomis had instructed. He noticed small tracks of lizards the way birds took flight in sudden bursts, and the occasional ripple in the sand that marked the movement of some unseen creature. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet Nokomis seemed to understand it all. Finally, they stopped near a small oasis hidden in a rocky depression. A few date palms leaned over a clear pool of water, and small plants grew in the shade. Elias rushed forward, bending to drink, but Nokomis held up her hand. "Slowly," she said. "Respect this water. Do not take more than you need. The desert provides, but it also tests." Elias hesitated, then knelt, taking a small sip. The water was cool and sweet, refreshing after the long march. He felt a brief, almost foolish sense of relief, thinking that survival might be simple after all. Nokomis, however, did not share his optimism. She scanned the area carefully, her eyes sharp. "The desert always watches," she said. "Even here, where life seems calm, there are hidden dangers. You must remain alert. A moment of carelessness can be fatal." Elias felt a chill, despite the heat. He realized that this journey was nothing like he had imagined. There would be no easy shortcuts, no sudden discoveries of gold or wealth. Every step would require thought, patience, and trust in Nokomis's guidance. After resting and drinking, they continued their trek. Nokomis taught Elias how to read the landscape. She showed him how to spot hidden water sources, how to find edible plants, and how to recognize tracks that could signal danger or opportunity. Elias struggled at first. His hands fumbled with unfamiliar herbs, and he misread tracks in the sand. Each mistake reminded him that the desert was not something to dominate. It was something to understand. As they walked, Nokomis told stories about her people and their relationship with the desert. She spoke of ancestors who had thrived because they listened, observed, and respected the land. She told of spirits that guarded sacred places, testing those who entered with arrogance or greed. Elias listened intently, feeling both awe and a rising fear. "These stories were not just tales. They were warnings, lessons hidden in myth. Around midday, the sun beat down relentlessly." Elias began to feel the weight of the desert, the exhaustion that came not just from walking, but from constant vigilance. His water supply was low again, and he had to remind himself to drink slowly, to ration, and to trust Nokomis's instincts. She, on the other hand, seemed tireless. She moved through the dunes as if the sun and sand were her allies rather than enemies. "You are learning," she said quietly, "but the desert tests more than the body. It tests your mind and your spirit. It watches how you respond to fear, to temptation, to impatience. Do you understand why I warned you yesterday?" Elias swallowed. "Yes," he admitted. "I think I'm starting to understand. It's not just the heat or the sand. It's everything. It's the land itself, and how I behave in it." Nokomis nodded slightly. "Good. Remember this lesson. It may save your life." As the afternoon wore on, they encountered their first real challenge. A narrow canyon opened ahead, its walls steep and jagged. The wind whistled through the gap, creating a strange echo. Nokomis stopped at the entrance, examining the rocks carefully. "This path is dangerous," she said. The stones shift easily and the canyon can hide predators. We must move carefully step by step. One wrong move. And you could fall or become trapped. Elias nodded, swallowing his fear. He had always thought of danger as something to be confronted with strength or courage. Now he realized that caution, patience, and respect were equally important. They began to navigate the canyon slowly, testing each stone before stepping, moving in silence except for the whisper of wind and the crunch of sand and rock beneath their feet. Halfway through, Elias slipped on a loose rock. He caught himself just in time, heart racing, and looked at Nokomis. She did not scold him. Instead, she guided him carefully through the rest of the canyon, showing him how to feel the stability of the stones beneath his feet and how to anticipate the movement of sand and rock.
You must trust the desert and trust yourself, she said.
Fear will make you careless. Respect will make you strong. By late afternoon, they emerged from the canyon into a wide-open valley. The air was calmer here, and the land stretched out before them in gentle slopes and scattered shrubs. Elias felt a brief surge of relief, thinking that the worst was over. But Nokomis did not relax. She paused, scanning the horizon. The desert is full of hidden tests, she said. Do not think that reaching this valley means safety. The land is alive, and it remembers those who walk through it. Elias felt a mixture of awe and anxiety. He had survived the canyon, learned to read some signs of the desert, and even understood a little of Nokomis's guidance. Yet he knew that these lessons were only the beginning. There was much more to understand, and the desert still held many secrets. As they set up a small camp for the night near a cluster of rocks, Nokomis prepared a simple meal. She taught Elias how to gather edible plants and how to purify water from the sparse sources they found.
Elias was amazed at her knowledge.
Every plant had a use, every shadow could reveal water or danger, and every movement in the sand could tell a story. That night, as Elias lay under the open sky, he looked at the stars stretching endlessly above him. The desert felt vast and infinite, and he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The wind carried whispers that seemed almost human, and he thought he could hear faint echoes of the stories Nokomis had told. He realized that his journey was no longer about finding gold or fortune. It was about survival, understanding, and respect. The desert was not just land. It was a teacher, a guardian, and a keeper of secrets. And Nokomis, the healer who had refused to obey his initial demands, was his guide through a world that was far older and wiser than he could imagine. As he drifted into a restless sleep, Elias promised himself that he would listen, learn, and respect every lesson the desert had to offer. Tomorrow, the journey would continue, and the challenges would grow. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope, not in riches or glory, but in the knowledge that he might survive and learn the ways of the land that had seemed so merciless the day before. The desert stretched endlessly around them, silent yet alive, holding its secrets tightly. Elias Harper had taken his first real steps into a world he did not understand, guided by a woman whose wisdom and courage seemed limitless. He did not yet know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing: he could not survive the desert alone. And he would need to obey, respect, and trust in Nokomis if he hoped to see another sunrise. The morning light broke across the desert, painting the dunes in shades of gold and orange. Elias Harper woke to the sound of wind whispering through the sparse rocks near their camp. He rubbed his eyes and saw Nokomis already awake, gathering herbs and checking their meager water supply. Her movements were smooth and deliberate, as if the desert itself guided her hands. Elias felt the heat pressing down even before he rose. His muscles ached from yesterday's journey, and the memory of the canyon's loose rocks made him nervous. He had learned some lessons, but he also knew he was far from ready for the desert's true challenges. He had underestimated its power, and the desert was already reminding him. Nokomis handed him a small bundle of herbs. "For energy and to prevent infection," she said. "Eat slowly. Every step today will test you, and you must be careful." Elias nodded, though he felt restless. His mind was still focused on the idea of reaching the rumored gold fields he had heard about from other travelers. He had come seeking wealth, and though he respected Nokomi's guidance, a part of him could not ignore the lure of fortune. They began walking again, the sand crunching beneath their feet. The desert was quieter than yesterday, but the stillness carried a sense of anticipation, as if it were waiting for something to happen. Nokomis moved ahead with confidence, while Elias followed, trying to match her pace but feeling the strain of the sun and the uneven terrain. After a few hours, they came to a vast expanse of dunes, stretching endlessly in every direction. The sun reflected off the sand, making it almost impossible to look without squinting. Elias felt his determination waver. The dunes seemed to rise higher with every step, and the heat pressed down like a heavy blanket. "This is a test," Nokomis said calmly, observing him carefully. "The desert wants to see how you handle exhaustion and frustration. Do not let pride or fear control you. You must move with patience, not haste."
Elias wiped sweat from his brow.
"It's impossible to keep going like this," he said, his voice strained. "The dunes, they just keep going. How can anyone survive?" Nokomis glanced at him, her eyes steady. "Those who survive do not fight the desert. They respect it." They move carefully, step by step. One hasty action, and the desert will teach you a lesson you will never forget. Elias clenched his fists, feeling both frustration and awe. He realized that his impatience could cost him dearly. He had always believed that courage alone could carry him through challenges, but now he saw that the desert demanded more: understanding, humility, and respect. As they climbed a particularly steep dune, Elias's leg, still healing from his previous injury, faltered. He stumbled, catching himself just in time. The sand beneath him shifted, and for a moment he felt a sharp fear. Nokomis reached out her hand, steadying him. "Do you see?" she said. "Every step matters. The desert notices your mistakes. Learn from them, or it will not forgive you." Elias nodded, swallowing his pride. He followed her carefully, feeling each footstep, testing the stability of the sand before moving. Slowly, painfully, they reached the top of the dune. The view stretched endlessly before them, waves of sand rippling toward distant hills. The desert seemed alive, immense, and powerful beyond anything he had imagined. Suddenly the wind picked up, stronger than before. Sand whipped into their faces, stinging their eyes and coating their skin. Nokomis pulled a cloth over her face, her eyes squinting as she scanned the horizon. "A sandstorm is coming," she said. "We must find shelter quickly." Elias felt panic rising. He had never faced a storm like this before. The thought of being caught in the open dunes, exposed to wind and sand, terrified him. Nokomis, however, remained calm, moving with certainty toward a narrow gap between two rock formations. They ducked into the shelter, the storm howling around them. The air was thick with sand, and the wind rattled against the rocks like distant drums. Elias crouched low, trying to breathe, his eyes watering. Nokomis sat beside him, her movements calm, almost meditative. "You see," she said over the roar of the wind, "the desert is testing more than your body. It tests your mind, your patience, your ability to remain calm. Fear will cloud your judgment. Panic will make you careless." Hours passed and the storm raged on. Elias felt every muscle tense, every nerve on edge. Yet Nokomis remained composed, occasionally adjusting their shelter or checking the wind's direction. He realized that she was not just a guide, she was a teacher. The desert was harsh, but with her guidance, survival was possible. When the storm finally subsided, the desert had changed. Sand had shifted, hiding familiar landmarks and creating new obstacles. Elias stared at the landscape, feeling small and unprepared. Nokomis stood and surveyed the terrain. "We move carefully," she said. "The desert has reshaped itself. What was safe yesterday may be deadly today. You must watch, listen, and think before you act." Elias followed her, now acutely aware of every detail. The way the sand had shifted around a rock, the faint tracks of an animal, the slight movement of distant plants in the wind. Every moment required attention. Every step demanded patience. As they moved deeper into the desert, Elias noticed shadows flitting in the distance. At first, he thought they were tricks of the light, but Nokomis stopped and observed them carefully. "Tracks of a predator," she said softly. "Perhaps a coyote. It is curious, not dangerous if we do not provoke it. But do not move carelessly. The desert notices everything." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The desert was no longer just land to cross. It was alive, watching, and judging. Every step, every movement mattered. He realized that survival required more than physical strength. It required awareness, respect, and humility. By late afternoon, Elias was exhausted. The heat, the sand, the constant vigilance, it was almost unbearable. Yet he also felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He had survived the storm, learned to move carefully across the dunes, and followed Nokomis' guidance. Each small success gave him confidence, but he knew the desert's trials were far from over. They reached a small plateau overlooking a dry riverbed. Nokomis motioned for him to rest. She pointed out small plants that could be used for food and water, showing him how to harvest them safely. Elias listened and learned, realizing that the desert provided but only to those who understood it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and purple, Nokomis set up a small fire. The evening air was cooler, but the desert still held a quiet intensity. Elias sat beside her, feeling both exhausted and enlightened. He had seen the desert's power, its danger, and its beauty, and he understood that he was only beginning to grasp its lessons. "The desert tests everyone," Nokomis said quietly. "It shows who is patient, who is reckless, who is wise. You have done well today, but the journey is far from over. You must continue to observe, to listen, to respect." He felt a mixture of relief and determination. The desert was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also teaching him lessons he could never have learned elsewhere. With Nokomis' guidance, he began to see a path forward. Not just to survive, but to understand the land and himself in ways he had never imagined. That night, as they slept under the vast desert sky, Elias could hear the faint whispers of wind over the dunes. It was almost as if the desert was speaking to him, testing him even in sleep. He dreamed of shifting sands, of strange shadows, and of Nokomis guiding him through challenges he could not yet see. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Elias Harper had changed. He was no longer just a man seeking fortune. He was a student of the desert, learning lessons that went beyond survival. The challenges had begun in earnest, and he knew that the desert's true secrets were still hidden, waiting for the next test. The morning air was cool, a rare relief from the unrelenting heat of the desert. Elias Harper stirred from his sleep, feeling the soreness in his muscles from the day before. He looked toward Nokomis, who was already awake, carefully preparing their sparse meal of roots, herbs, and dried fruit. Her movements were steady, almost ritualistic, as though the desert itself guided her hands. Today, Elias felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The desert had tested him in ways he had never imagined, and he could feel that the next part of the journey would challenge him even more. He had begun to trust Nokomis, yet he could not help wondering what lay ahead. The thought of treasure or the rumored gold hidden in these sands lingered in the back of his mind, though he tried to push it aside. The desert had already taught him that greed and impatience could be deadly. They set out, the sand soft and shifting beneath their feet. Nokomis led him with confidence, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon, reading the subtle signs of the land. Elias tried to do the same, looking for footprints, animal tracks, and the small changes in the wind. Every moment required attention. Every step demanded respect. After hours of walking, they reached a rocky ridge that overlooked a vast, barren valley. From this vantage point, Elias could see the desert stretching endlessly in all directions, the sun reflecting off dunes and rock formations in dazzling waves. But something caught his eye, a faint glimmer among the rocks in the distance, unlike the sun's reflection. It was small, almost hidden, yet it stood out against the natural landscape. Nokomis noticed his gaze. "You see it," she said softly. "That is the entrance to a sacred place. Few have laid eyes upon it, and fewer still have entered with understanding." It is a place the desert guards closely, for it holds the secrets of those who came before us. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. His heart pounded with curiosity, awe, and a touch of fear. "What? What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "It is a shrine," Nokomis explained, "a place where our ancestors spoke to the spirits of the desert, leaving knowledge and guidance for those who could see and understand. It is not a place for greed or pride. Those who enter with selfish intent will find only danger." Elias nodded, trying to quiet the part of him still drawn to treasure or riches. He understood that this was different. The desert had tested him physically, but this would be a test of his heart and mind. They made their way carefully down the rocky ridge toward the shrine. The path was narrow, treacherous, and filled with hidden pitfalls. Every step required attention. Sand and stones shifted unpredictably, and Elias could feel the desert watching him, testing his focus and respect. Nokomis moved with her usual calm, guiding him, correcting his steps, and teaching him how to sense the land beneath his feet. As they approached the entrance, Elias saw the shrine clearly. It was carved into the rock, its walls covered with ancient symbols and faded paintings. The symbols were intricate, telling stories of the desert, its animals, its seasons, and its spirits. Elias ran his hand lightly over the carvings, feeling a strange energy pass through him. This was not a place of gold or material wealth. It was a place of knowledge, wisdom, and spiritual power. Nokomis motioned for him to stop. "Do not touch carelessly," she warned. "Every mark, every carving, has meaning. To disrespect it is to disrespect the desert itself. You must enter with humility." Elias took a deep breath, bowing his head slightly. He felt a mixture of reverence and fear. This place was older than any civilization he had known, and the energy it held was palpable. The desert had not only hidden it, but protected it for centuries. Inside the shrine, the air was cool and dry, a stark contrast to the heat outside. Shadows danced along the walls, and the carvings seemed to move as the sunlight shifted through small openings. Nokomis led him slowly, explaining the meanings of symbols, showing how the desert's seasons, animals, and spirits were all connected. Elias listened intently, absorbing the lessons, realizing that this knowledge was far more valuable than any gold he could hope to find. As they explored deeper, Elias noticed a small alcove containing objects carefully placed: stones, bones, feathers, and dried herbs. Nokomis explained that these were offerings left by ancestors to honor the desert and maintain balance. "Each offering is a promise," she said. "A promise to respect life, to follow the ways of the land, and to honor those who came before. To take or remove them for selfish reasons is to break the promise and invite disaster." This was the desert's true secret. It was not treasure that mattered, but knowledge, respect, and harmony. He looked around, realizing that every step he had taken to survive, every lesson Nokomis had taught him, had been leading to this moment. The desert was teaching him patience, humility, and reverence, but temptation was still present. Elias remembered the rumors he had heard of hidden gold in these parts. He could almost see it, hidden beneath the sands outside, waiting for him. For a brief moment his mind raced with desire, but then he looked at Nokomis, her calm, unwavering gaze, and the sacred carvings surrounding him. He understood that taking anything for himself would be a betrayal, not just of the shrine, but of everything the desert had taught him. He took a step back and bowed his head. "I understand," he said quietly. "This is not about gold. It's about respect, knowledge, and survival. I will not take anything that does not belong to me." Nokomis nodded, a faint smile appearing on her face. "Good. The desert has judged you, and it has accepted your decision. Many fail this test. Remember this lesson, Elias Harper. True value is not always what you can hold in your hands. Sometimes it is what you carry in your mind and heart." As they left the shrine, the desert seemed to respond. The wind softened, the sand became easier to walk on, and the sun, though still hot, felt less harsh. Elias realized that the desert was not merely a place of danger. It was alive, responsive, and intelligent in ways he had never imagined. He had passed one of its greatest tests, and the knowledge he had gained would guide him for the rest of his life. Yet, even as they continued, Nokomis warned him that the desert's tests were far from over. There were still challenges ahead, storms, treacherous terrain, and hidden dangers, but Elias now understood the key to survival: respect, patience, and awareness. By late afternoon, they reached a small plateau overlooking a valley filled with low shrubs and scattered water pools. Elias felt a sense of peace for the first time in days. He had faced fear, exhaustion, and temptation, and he had learned to listen, observe, and respect. The desert's secrets were not easy to uncover, but those who approached with humility and care could find guidance and wisdom. That evening, as the sun set behind distant dunes, Elias reflected on the journey so far. He had come seeking fortune, but he had found something far greater: understanding. The desert had tested his body, mind, and spirit, and he had learned that survival required more than strength or bravery. It required connection to the land, to its history, and to those who had walked before him. Nokomis prepared a small fire, and they shared a modest meal. Elias felt a deep gratitude for her guidance, realizing that without her wisdom he would never have survived the harshness of the desert, nor understood the hidden lessons it offered. As night fell, the desert was quiet but alive. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, and the air carried a cool, soothing calm. Elias knew that the journey was far from over, but he also knew that he was ready for whatever trials lay ahead. He had faced the desert's tests and learned to respect its power, and now he could walk forward with understanding and humility. For the first time, Elias felt a sense of true connection with the land. The desert had shared its secrets not in gold or wealth, but in wisdom and guidance. And he knew that these lessons, once learned, would stay with him forever, shaping the man he was becoming in ways he could not yet fully understand. The dawn broke slowly over the desert, painting the sand in soft pinks and golds. The air was cooler than previous days, carrying a faint scent of dry earth and distant herbs. Elias Harper woke, feeling the calm of the morning but also a nervous energy. Today, he knew, would be the final test. The desert had guided him through hardship, taught him patience, and revealed its secrets, but it was not finished. Nokomis was already awake as usual, tending to their modest camp. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had lived in harmony with the desert for decades. Her eyes, sharp and deep, seemed to read the land itself. She looked at Elias, and though her face remained calm, he could sense a hint of gravity in her gaze. "The desert has more to show you," she said quietly. "The lessons you have learned will guide you, but the choice you face today will decide whether you truly understand what it asks." He had followed her guidance for days, survived storms, navigated treacherous terrain, and discovered the sacred shrine. He had learned humility, patience, and respect. Yet the thought of a final test filled him with both anticipation and fear. They began walking early, the sand cool beneath their feet. Nokomis led him along a path that wound through rocky hills and low scrub. The land seemed familiar, yet subtly changed. The desert was alive, shifting, as if aware of their presence. Elias walked carefully, noting the small details Nokomis had taught him: animal tracks, changes in the wind, and subtle marks in the sand that indicated water or danger. After several hours, they reached the edge of a canyon, wider and deeper than any they had crossed before. At its center lay a narrow path leading to a flat plateau, but the journey across it was perilous. Loose rocks, hidden crevices, and sharp drops challenged every step. Elias felt a mixture of fear and determination. This was no ordinary trek. It was a final proving ground. "The desert will test not just your body today," Nokomis said. "It will test your judgment, your humility, and your courage. You must move with care, and above all, with respect. One mistake could be your last." Elias nodded, swallowing his fear. He understood that the desert was not a simple land to cross. It was a living teacher, and he had to pay attention to every detail. Together they moved slowly, testing each rock before stepping, helping each other over the treacherous stretches. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the sound of shifting sand and distant cries of animals. The air was tense, as if the desert itself held its breath. Halfway through the canyon, Elias spotted something glittering in a narrow crevice. His heart skipped a beat. It looked like gold, sunlight reflecting off something hidden. For a moment the old desire surged, the dream of wealth, fortune, and a life free from struggle. But then he remembered Nokomis's words, the lessons of the shrine, and the storms he had survived.
He realized that taking it would be disrespectful, reckless, and dangerous.
He turned to Nokomis. I won't take it, he said firmly. I understand now. This isn't about treasure. It's about respect. Nokomis's face softened slightly. The desert sees your choice, she said. It judges not what you desire, but how you act on it. You have passed this trial, Elias Harper. Remember this lesson. The greatest value is not in what you can hold, but in what you carry in your heart. The canyon stretched ahead, challenging them with narrow paths and steep edges. Elias moved cautiously, trusting Nokomis's guidance and the instincts he had learned. Each step felt like a conversation with the land itself. The desert, once an unknown and frightening expanse, had become a teacher, a test, and a guide. As they reached the plateau, the view took Elias's breath away. The desert unfolded in all directions, a vast sea of golden shadow, rolling dunes, rocky ridges, and distant mountains. It was beautiful, awe-inspiring, and humbling. For the first time he felt small, not in fear, but in reverence. He understood that the desert had given him something far greater than wealth, knowledge, wisdom, and the understanding of life's true balance. Nokomis paused near the edge of the plateau. This is where the desert reveals its final secret, she said. You must choose your path carefully. You can follow what you desire, or you can follow what is right. Your future depends on this choice.
Elias felt the weight of her words. He thought of the hardships he had endured, the storms he had survived, and the sacred shrine he had discovered.
He thought of the lessons he had learned. Patience, respect, humility, and observation. The desert had been harsh, but fair. It had given him every chance to understand its ways. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the wind wash over him. He felt the desert's energy in the shifting sand beneath his feet, in the distant calls of birds, in the whispering of the wind through rocks and scrub. He realized that true success was not measured by what he could take from the land, but by how he lived within it, learning and respecting its rules. I choose respect, Elias said aloud. I choose to follow the lessons I have learned, not my own desire for wealth or glory. Nokomis smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. Then you have understood, she said. The desert honors those who learn its ways. You will carry this knowledge for the rest of your life, and it will guide you in ways you cannot yet imagine.
As they prepared to leave the plateau, the desert seemed to shift around them. Shadows lengthened, colors deepened, and a gentle wind blew across the dunes.
Elias felt a sense of peace, a connection to the land that he had never experienced before. The desert was no longer an enemy or a challenge to overcome. It was a teacher, a guardian, and a guide. They made their way back toward the settlement, retracing their steps carefully. Elias noticed the subtle details he had missed on the way in, the patterns of the sand, the movement of small creatures, the hidden signs that marked water and shelter. Every moment was a lesson, every step a chance to practice the wisdom he had gained. When they arrived, the villagers greeted them quietly, sensing the change in Elias. He moved differently now, not with haste or arrogance, but with a calm confidence, a respect for the land and its rules. Nokomis nodded to him, acknowledging the transformation. You have learned well, she said. Remember these lessons. The desert never forgets, and those who walk within it carry its memory forever. Elias looked around at the settlement, at the simple adobe homes, the children playing, the elders watching quietly. He realized that the desert's wisdom was not just for survival in the wild, it was for life itself. Patience, respect, humility, and awareness were lessons that extended far beyond sand and rocks. That night, as Elias lay under the vast desert sky, he reflected on the journey. He had come seeking wealth and fortune, but he had found something far greater: understanding, connection, and transformation. The desert had tested him physically, mentally, and spiritually, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more humble. He thought of Nokomis, her calm guidance, her unwavering wisdom, and her lessons about respect for the land. He realized that she had been more than a healer. She had been a mentor, a guide, and a guardian of the desert's secrets. Through her, he had learned not only to survive but to see the desert as it truly was, alive, intelligent, and full of lessons for those who were willing to listen. As the stars stretched endlessly above him, Elias made a silent promise. He would carry these lessons with him for the rest of his life. He would respect the land, honor those who came before him, and remember that true value was not in what he could take, but in what he learned, shared, and understood. The desert, vast and mysterious, had kept its secrets, but it had shared what mattered most. Elias Harper had survived its trials, learned its wisdom, and emerged transformed. The journey had ended, but the lessons would remain forever, guiding him through all the deserts of life yet to come. And somewhere in the stillness, the wind whispered across the dunes, carrying with it the approval of the land and the knowledge that Elias Harper had truly listened. He had chosen the path of respect, humility, and understanding, and in doing so, he had become part of the desert's timeless story.